Hello, and welcome back to the My First Marathon podcast, where we interview runners in all stages of their running careers on their first marathon experience to show you that anyone can run a marathon. If you're looking for advice on the mental aspect of running and how to cultivate a good mindset through training, then you're in the right place with this episode. This runner has 13 marathons under her belt, and instead of breaking down each race, we actually talk about a lot of the lessons learned along the way instead. I'm excited for you to hear her story. There's a lot of great little nuggets of information in this one, so without further ado, please welcome Sonia. Sonia, thank you so much for coming on the podcast this weekend. How's your weekend been so far?
The weekend has been pretty good. A lot of running. Yesterday I did 14 miles, and then today was 6.
Nice. So
Yeah.
do you normally do your long run on Saturdays and like your recovery on Sundays? Is that your typical routine?
Yeah, my coach actually has me do back to back on the weekends
Hmm.
to get me used to running on tired legs more. She herself is an elite runner, my coach,
Yeah.
so she's very much, trains me kind of like a semi-elite, even though I don't have the speed for being even close to
Yeah.
the elite.
That's all right. It's cool. It's unique to get that level of training though. I'm sure that regardless of where your pace is, I'm sure that pays off in the long run somehow.
Yeah, no, it pays off. I really feel like I actually like that better, doing back-to-back runs on the weekends than just having
Yeah.
one long run on a weekend a day and then sprinkling in some during the week. I mean, I still do some runs during the week, and I'll typically get up to maybe like now on a weekday, maybe the longest time I go is 8 to 10 miles
Mm.
on a weekday, but then definitely the double digits on the weekends. But like but then there are shorter runs you do during the week, like your tempo runs, your progression runs, fartleks, all that.
Sure, sure. Well, cool. And I'm sure we'll get a little bit into your running routine kind of as we walk through everything, but I want to kind of start from the beginning if you don't mind. How did we
Sure.
get introduced to this crazy world in the first place?
So I used to live in New York City from 2011 to 2016. And during my time living in New York City, I used to hear about people talking about how they would go and run in Central Park and they would be doing the loop. And I thought that was really super cool. Now, before I moved to New York City, I think the furthest I've ever done was like a 5K.
Mm,
And, I got into that, everybody was talking about 5Ks back in 2010. And I wanted to, and then I had a friend who actually introduced me to running outside on the lakefront path in Chicago. And once I got into it, I just didn't want to stop. It's just very addictive. And so um, when I told a coworker in New York City that I was getting back into running, she goes, "Sonia, you should look at New York Roadrunners." And then lo and behold, I saw that they were doing a run, a 4 mile run, 4 miles of hope run in Central Park in 2014 with Autism Speaks Team Up.
mm,
And that sang to me because I was diagnosed at 20 with being on the autism spectrum, high functioning. And um, I just thought, um, okay, this is like a sign that I need to be here. And I ran that race. It was a 4 miler, but I loved every moment of just running and seeing all these people out. And it was it was like a fun run, kind of in a way that, people were bringing their kids and people were, with their families. You saw whole entire families together. You saw just, you had your competitive runners too, and you had all sorts of people out there. And I just felt like that was a beautiful thing. And it was something I knew that I had to stick with and I had to do. And I was very grateful that I had that opportunity to be part of that race.
yeah. Yeah. And talk about a sign, like you said, like being the charity organization that they chose and your diagnosis and all of that. It's like that, it seemed like all the cards were kind of aligning for you to run that race, which is pretty cool.
Absolutely. I felt like it was just a like divine intervention for sure.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. Well, cool. So that's kind of how you got into it. And you mentioned that there was something about running that you kind of got hooked on, or it's a little bit addictive in the beginning. Do you remember like what that was for you in the beginning that really got you hooked on the thing?
Feeling you'd get when you go out and run. It was just, that runner's high, just getting out, getting air, getting elements of nature. just feeling good overall. I mean, I always feel like a kid at recess every single time that I go running. I really feel like I'm that little kid on the playground
Yeah,
again and
I love
again and
that.
again.
Cool, cool. Where'd you progress from there? Were you thinking I'm gonna keep signing up for races, or how did you kind of progress?
So after I did that 4 miles run for hope, I was like, I want to do more. And um, I then, before I left New York City to come back to Chicago, where I'm from, I I signed up with Team Up to do the New York City half in 2016. And when I moved back to Chicago, that's when I knew, part of how I was going to get through this transition, because I had moved back because I was changing careers.
Mm,
I was going back to school to become a therapist at that point, and I was at that time in my mid to later 30s, okay? And I felt like the only way I was, going to get motivated and stay motivated is if I had things on my plate. And I signed up with Autism Speaks Team Up to do the marathon as well. And so that's how things progressed is, I did some half marathons in New York City, but one of the things though is because I was very overweight back then, it was nowhere close to easy for me
sure.
to finish those races. I mean, I still finished them, but I was like dead last a lot of times. So for me, because I was so overweight, that was the thing I kept thinking in the back of my mind is once I sign up for this marathon, it's going to make the difference. I'm going to drop all these pounds because I'll get really serious about my training. And I did okay at the 2016 New York City half. I did shave off time from previous half marathons, but if I was more in control of my diet and, just the fact that, I needed to have a system of how I ate food instead of binge eat, because I used to binge eat a lot.
Hmm.
And that was one of the things that really put the weight on me is that binge eating. And so any running that I would do would be kind of pointless then because it would not outdo what I was already doing to myself and the damage I was doing to myself with the binge eating
Sure.
and binge drinking, even to that point, because there would be times when I'd go out to dinner and easily I'd have like 4 glasses of wine, right? So it's just like, but I needed to balance, and so so that's kind of one of the things that, happened along the way is, lot of learning lessons in the process of marathoning.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely not a point A to point B sort of thing when you think about training for a marathon. Everybody's a little bit different. We all have our own struggles that were going on in the background. And I think maybe marathon training helps us click a lot of those things into place because it requires you to take your health a little bit more seriously and things like that. But yeah, in the beginning when you're kind of trying to find your way, 100%, it's difficult to navigate those challenges. So how was like the binge eating, the binge drinking, that kind of thing, like impacting you on the running side?
It really was slowing me down, and
Mhm.
it was taking away the ability to be able to do longer mileage. And so when I moved back in 2016, so I joined a running organization back in Chicago. And the thing is, because I was so unhealthy, I was not able to wake up early enough to go run.
Mm,
And when I did get out there, my willpower was just shut down because it would be hot by the time I left the house,
right.
and I would be like, screw this. I don't want to do this. I'm going to cut this short and I'll try this again tomorrow. But that's like the biggest lie you could ever say to yourself sometimes is, yeah, I could do this again tomorrow. No, I was working with a personal trainer at the time, and it was not until he started taking me out for runs where, I mean, mileage did increase with time because I was working with him, but and he used to take me to go run. And I think the longest I did was maybe 13 or 14 miles on the first training of the marathon back in 2016. And it clearly wasn't enough. And I know, like, he was talking to some other clients and, you know, keeping my anonymity. He said that he had a client who's running this marathon and she runs really slow. And the thing
Mm,
is, when we were running, I was lucky. If it was a good day, 14 miles is great, right?
yeah.
14-minute miles is great. But sometimes it was even worse than that, 16, 17, 18, right? So they were telling him she should start doing run 1 mile, then walk for 10, walk for like 10 seconds,
Mm,
then start again,
yeah.
and we started doing that. But I think I needed something even more concretely broken down. And so, safe to say this, in the 2016 marathon, I had no clue about marathoning. Okay. I walked
Yeah.
into it like blindfolded. And honestly, the first time that the blindfold was ripped from me was the day of the race.
Yeah.
So Chicago does this thing where if you finish within 6.5 hours from your start time, because the official time limit is 6.5 hours.
Hmm.
So anybody who finished within 6.5 hours got their name printed in the paper in the Chicago Tribune in the marathon section. So in 2016, that was just my goal is, okay, can I get done in 6.5 hours so I could get my name in the paper?
Gotcha. Yeah.
But there was no way in hell that happened for me because I was, so I kept with the program and I just did the run 1 mile, walk point 10, all this. And it got to a point where I practically just walked the rest of the marathon
Hmm.
because my stamina was not good and my weight was way over. Like, when I look at a picture of myself at the finish line, you know, well, first and foremost, by the time I got there to the finish line, it was shut down. So
Mm.
all the runners had to walk, who were not done within a certain time, had to finish on the sidewalks because the cops were patrolling. And so the police officer told me, hey, can you guys get on the sidewalk? Thank you, because they
Oh,
had to reopen the roads. They
yeah.
shut down the finish line, so they had volunteers at the sidewalks for the really late finishers to come and get their medals. And I couldn't even feel proud of myself. I felt disgusted. I felt ashamed of myself. I felt like, oh my God, there's no way in hell I'd even deserve a medal. I literally was my own worst enemy, like, and my own worst critic. And people, I mean, there were people who were supportive. Everybody was proud. They're like, hey, good job, Sonia, you did it. But
Sure.
I couldn't even tell myself that. I couldn't even relish in it. I just did not feel proud of myself at all.
Yeah, that's tough. I think that that's kind of a we've talked about it a couple of times on this show about like some of the experiences that back of the pack runners experience with on race day. Like we've talked about with other runners not having enough water, like water is completely gone by the end, and not having anybody who's there at the finish line to cheer you on. Spectators have all left, and all of these experiences. And I think I'm glad that you bring it up because I think it's an important topic for just race directors and races in general to make sure that we make it a good experience for everybody because you still ran a marathon, whether you were
Yeah,
felt like it or not at the time, you still ran a marathon. So I think it's unfortunate that that's the experience that a lot of people go through.
it is. That's why, you know what, I'll tell you this, and my whole marathoning, because my marathon did get better this, after, because I said, I'm gonna train better. I got on a diet. I got help actually from a nutritionist. I
Hmm.
got on a diet. I dropped a lot of weight after the
Yeah.
first marathon. And so by the time I did the second marathon, I finished within the official time limit. And it's been like that ever since. I finished within the official time limits. But, they have one thing I have noticed is Chicago has gotten better about, I think, staying open a little later,
Sure.
for more back of the pack runners. I'll say this in New York, because I've done Chicago, New York, San Francisco, and LA. Okay.
Mm.
The full
All big
marathons.
ones. Yeah.
Yes. And um, LA is, like, of course, the people are really chill in LA. San
Yeah.
Francisco, really chill. Um, In New York, I've done 3 times. In Chicago, I've done every year since 2016. So,
Wow.
sh- New York, though, the best, one thing I will say is that's very commendable about the New York City Marathon is the finish line stays open. And they even have like and I've seen this on the news and I've seen this on social media too, where they'd have like a after party, like for the late finishers to come in. There's a whole group of people that come back out. I think even the news came back out at a
Oh,
certain
that's
time.
great. Yeah.
And it's like, it makes me emotional actually to watch something like that, just because it does go to show that there are people who are there, who are so dedicated and so, not only the people who are competing, and we're talking about like people who are competing on their feet for like 9, 10 hours,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
10 plus even. And, you're talking about people that, you know, well, the relentless courage to not give up, because and this is one thing I was thinking this on this run today that I did is, for all the people who want to heckle back of the pack runners, you know what, they can beat you in perseverance, in grit. They're already beating you, they're already lapping you in so many other ways: time on the feet,
100%.
perseverance, that ability to stay out for long periods of time, and that their grit. I mean, it's unmatched. I mean, I would hate to go up against somebody who said, you know what, I never gave up and I was completing a marathon and it took me 10 hours to finish it. I would hate to be, try to even compete and try to tear someone down like that, because you know what? They would tear me down faster than I could ever tear them down because of their
Sure.
grit, right?
Absolutely.
So, I mean, and that's the thing that people don't see. It's the things that people don't see.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And it's not even just the slower runners that we put into that category. I think, I was just talking to somebody, a runner who on social media, typically she's in the middle to front of the pack as a runner. And she happened to talk about a couple marathon experiences where things just did not go her way. And she ended up in that 6+ hour group. So it's just silly that people put those labels on people because you have no idea, and everybody that's out there on race day, like you said, is pushing through more than you could ever imagine if you're standing on the sidelines. So I wish we could just have a little more respect for each other, you know what I mean?
I think definitely there is a long way to go with that, because
Yeah.
I have seen this too, like even on like different like groups and stuff on social media, where people would make comments about body image, and people would make comments about, um, you know, what a runner should look like. And I think people have this idea that if you are not this stick skinny person, okay, that, you know, it's hard for people to fathom that anybody of a different kind of body type or size can run long mileage, which is the most ignorant way to live life, because
Absolutely.
runners don't come with a certain look. Everyone's body is different, everyone's build is different. We were all made our own way. So to just compare and put us all in this kind of box is silly.
It is. Yeah. 100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's an important discussion for sure. Um, and it sounds like for your first marathon experience, you didn't get the first marathon experience maybe you were hoping for. So I know you've ran
No.
several since then. Where was the point where maybe you did have a little bit better of an experience and you could feel like, okay, I actually accomplished this distance for myself?
Well, in 2017, the year after, I
Yeah,
shaved off. So 2016, I finished in 7 hours and 44 minutes. Okay, the
yeah,
Chicago Marathon. When I came back in 2017, I finished it in 6 hours and 21 minutes,
that's
around that
great. Wow.
time. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I just felt that experience then. I was like, I finished it. Yeah, it was great. I got a beer at the finish line. You know, I was just happy, and I got my name in the paper that time, and I just was so, it felt really good. And I just was like, this is what it feels like to finish a marathon,
Yeah.
in true style, in the way I would have liked. And um yeah, and I had joined a different running group at that time, and they were very structured, and
Hmm.
um I actually, they helped build me up a lot too with the running and endurance and stamina.
Yeah. Yeah, so good. So you got the experience the second time around where you really got to sit in it, which is fantastic. And what do you feel like? I know when we talk about marathoning, it's very much a mental game. So what mentally was different the first time around from when you ran it the second time around?
When I ran it the second time around, I definitely was more dialed in with my nutrition.
Mm,
I was serious about dropping the weight, and I did. I also was committed, like I did a lot of, I made sure I attended practices with the group during the week even. I was running more consistently. There was a lot of things I started doing differently. I mean, I was strength training still, but I was also getting more of my runs in and making sure that I was doing what I needed to do to be successful on race day the way I would have wanted to be, how I defined success to be.
yeah.
And it and also, it also helped too because I had made connections within the group, and it was nice to have that community.
For sure. Yeah. I'm glad that you had that experience with run clubs because I've had a lot of stories on here too of kind of the opposite experience when you're coming from the middle to back of the pack where maybe it can be a little tough to join a run group because you feel like maybe you're going to be left behind. It's all like I think it all depends on the guide of the group for the most part that kind of dictates the overall feel. But did you ever have any experiences like that or was it pretty much like you said where more of a community everybody was kind of picking each other up and pushing each other forward and that kind of thing?
So with that particular group, I had
Yeah.
more of that community feeling, but
Yeah.
I have been with other run groups before, and I have noticed because I am not the fastest runner on the team at all.
Sure.
And I've noticed though that, what, a lot of groups, they tend to push forward. And if you're left behind, I mean, you're kind of left behind to fend,
Yeah.
and I've seen that before. I've been on that end as well. I don't mind it though, personally, because I, this is the thing, I love to run around people, but I also like to be able to zonk out when I want, right? So,
Yeah.
meaning,
Yeah.
yeah, like whether I'm listening to podcasts, whether I'm
Yeah.
listening to music, whether, I'm just wanted to just be in my own head and just, be in my own imaginative, creative head. Like I literally, I don't mind that though. I'm not like bothered necessarily by being
Sure.
left behind. But I think that, it is, but I think every time that you're in that position, that also gives you a chance to kind of learn to be your own cheerleader too.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And how does that show up for you if you don't mind me asking? Like how when you're in those moments are you able to kind of show up as your own cheerleader?
I like to use certain mantras. So one thing I've been doing a lot of, so this past weekend, so yesterday, perfect example,
Yeah.
it was scorching hot, okay? And there was a moment I did have to stop, okay, for a little bit. So I mean, I stopped at the aid stations that they had out on the path because um, the run groups, they would put like Gatorade and water stations up on certain places on the path,
Mhm.
and people, the runners would come, they'll pause their watches, would just get our hydration and keep going. And I had my handheld Amphiphod on as well. And there were some good Samaritans that also were handing out electrolyte drinks yesterday. And it was scorching to a point. So on my way back, I did it out and back. And on the way back, I honestly had to stop by at one of like the beach bars and get a soda
Mm.
because I needed that extra energy. And the way that I was cheerleading myself is I said, "Okay, Sonia, it's okay. It's not you, it's the heat. Get what you need, but you're not a quitter. You're built for this, right? You're built for heat." And I was just reminding myself, like where my family came from, right? My ancestors, we came from a climate of scorch. So I was like, this is not for nothing, and this is how
Yeah.
it showed up for me. Like, you belong, stay, you belong here. You're built for this. You're strong. You're setting an example. You're using dirt that people threw at you and you're making a dirt castle. Like you are, I mean, this is one thing, that's like how I talk about, talk to myself. I think of it
Yeah.
as, you know what, you're setting an example. This is going to be a big inspiration because I have this big imagination. And that's one thing about me. And I even write about this in my upcoming book.
Cool.
And
Yeah.
I write about, it's called Dropped in the Maze. It's with the publisher right now. It got recently picked
Amazing.
up. Oh, thank you.
Congratulations. That's so cool.
Oh, thank you, thank you. And I was like, we were talking about, we talk about like, I talk about having this big imagination, and I was like, you know what? For me, the big thing I've always wanted and goal is to one day qualify for Boston. And there's a story to that, is that that's the place my parents first lived when they came to America, when they immigrated
Oh,
here in the
cool.
late 60s. And I thought this is a great way to kind of say thank you to them for all they've done and all the sacrifices they made. And also as a way to just kind of um, kind of like have that family history loop kind of thing, kind of close, if you
It's like a
will,
full
or
circle moment.
yeah, it's a
Yeah.
full circle moment. There you go.
Yeah.
It's just like that's what I want, and that's what keeps me also motivated, and also that cheerleader. And I'm a firm believer in this, to just always be your own biggest fan.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, especially running is such an individual sport. It's like we kind of have to be, we have to be our own biggest cheerleaders, and we have to say the mantras to ourselves and all of that. Because at the end of the day, if we boil it all down, these are goals that we're putting on ourselves. So we have to be the ones that are, boosting ourselves up, and at the end of the day, the ones that are, here for ourselves. So I think that's a great point. But Boston is a massive dream. So when did that dream come about for you for wanting to qualify for Boston?
So I started dreaming about this back in 2018,
Oh, wow.
2019.
So it's been on the mind for a bit.
For a bit, yeah. I
Yeah.
think I started getting more of that dream after 2018, when I saw Des Linden win that year.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and I was just like that. Then I was like, I would love to go to Boston to do like a full circle moment for my family, in the sense of my parents, and have that completion, because I was like, that's really cool. And I just felt more inspired to go there after just watching the 2018 marathon and seeing how, you know, even though the conditions were brutal in weather, but yet seeing all the people out and seeing just people persevering and pushing through and having the crowd support like no other, I just felt like I would love to just go and do it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I'm sure the energy, from what I've heard, I haven't ran Boston myself, obviously, but I've heard from other people, it's just unmatched. So any experience that you get while you're there, whether the race goes to how you wanted it to go or not, you're going to have an amazing experience. So I think that's an awesome goal. Working with your coach, is that something that like you communicate with your coach, and that's something you guys are constantly working for, or how front of mind, I guess, does the Boston dream stay for you these days?
It's kind of there. I mean, there were moments where I did put it on the back burner, because I'm like, I
Uh-huh.
want to try to do like ultra marathons, because, my marathoning didn't just stop at just marathoning. I wanted to push for more. And one of the goals I wanted to try to do was a 50 miler.
Yeah.
I did the 31.1 miles, which is the 50K. Then I attempted the 50 miler last year, actually in 2023. The Chicago Marathon was like 2 to 3 weeks beforehand. So I did that. And then the, the 50 miler was like right at the end of October. And I attempted it, but I got lost on the course, because the way they had the course route set up, it was like more on the back end of the trail.
Mm,
So it wasn't like on the actual main trail where people run on normally.
gotcha. Yeah.
So they had their own setup. And because I wasn't used to that kind of setup, I got lost a couple times. And the thing is, they don't give you credit for the extra mileage that you ran. unless you actually followed that route, because they do have the chip timer mats on certain
Gotcha.
places.
Yeah.
And so I got up to 41 miles that time. And um, I remember I cried like no other because they shut the course down. They had to
Mm.
close the course. And one of my friends came to check up on me to see how I was doing. And we, and she was like, Sonia, you still did 41 miles. It's okay. And I was like, but still, I don't know what it is, but it is an emotional sport, man. It's an emotional sport when you're out there. And I just still, I don't know. I was talking to a couple of friends and they're like, Sonia, just don't let evil try to talk you, downplay
Yeah.
you or discourage you. But it was like, it's an emotional sport. I don't know if this happens to you, but do you cry after
Yeah.
races?
For at the finish line, I have. Yeah, I always get emotional at the finish because it always feels like the training is like coming to fruition into one moment. You're like, oh my god, it's happening too fast, you know. So
Yeah.
emotions is definitely hard to regulate at the end of the race. But no, I totally feel what you're feeling. Like it is it messes with you. Especially I haven't ran an ultra myself, but the people I've spoken to, it's like you get into a sounds like you get into a mindset of almost delirium at a certain point where
Oh, yeah.
you're feeling everything and nothing all at the same time, and it's just like a mental battle that you're having with yourself. So that makes total sense to me. Yeah.
It is a mental battle for sure. And it's like, then you ask yourself, what the hell am I doing?
Yeah, exactly.
For sure. But that's when those mantras, you would talk about mental toughness here. If you think you needed that for the marathon, you're going to need double dosage of that for the ultra
Oh yeah.
marathon.
Yeah. Yeah, what was it like transitioning from training for marathons to training for the 50 miler or for ultras in general?
So I trained with a group, and the head coach of the group I was training with, she's done like I think 135 marathons, and she's
Wow.
done like ultras. And so I told her, because she's done plenty of like 50 milers and things, and so I told her I wanted to try it. So she actually helped set up the plan for me, and she suggested this, that I do 8-minute run, 2-minute walk. And she wanted me to, and then I was also working with my private coach at that time as well, and so she was on board with the whole run walking for that, for the
Yeah.
ultra. But because typically, here's the thing, because when with regular, just if it was just the marathon training, my coach was never really a big fan of just run walk. I
Mm.
don't think so. She was more into continuous run and just keep pushing, right? And I
Mhm.
think that was their motto. Well, at least what I sensed it. But then when I communicated run walking, I mean, they understood it. They understood why I wanted to do it.
Right.
But with the ultra, when I told her I was doing the ultra as well, then she was on board with what I was going to do. But this is where the back to back long runs on weekends started, is
Mm.
with, because even so, the coach that talked about, the fact that I do run walk for the ultra, but then also get in the habit of doing it for the marathon first as a training.
Sure. Yeah, it can't
She,
hurt.
yeah, it can't hurt. And actually, I PR, I did better actually when I did the run walk in the marathon.
Yeah.
Having that system in place, actually, I got done faster. I noticed, because when you are run walking, you are running faster. I have not been run walking now because I'm just focusing on the marathons only now. But like, I've noticed though, moments when I have done the run walk, I've finished a marathon a little quicker.
Yeah,
So
I've heard that a lot. Yeah, anybody that does the what's it called? The
Jeff
Galloway,
Galloway,
yeah,
yeah.
method, and anybody that's done that, I've heard that they actually end up finishing with better times, or they finish with less fatigue and things like that. Definitely a big advocate of walking on this podcast. So I like anybody that can kind of fit that into their overall strategy for sure. I'm curious about fuel too. I know that since you've got 13 marathons, almost going to be 14 and 15 under your belt, your fuel strategies probably changed quite a bit over time. What do you typically go stick to? Do you have like a routine for when you take gels or chews or anything like that throughout the race?
Yeah, I really like the applesauce.
Yeah,
Actually, I like doing that on the
yeah,
go. I also like the orange gels, the chews.
Okay.
I have to actually go get some now that you were talking about it,
Add it to the
because
list. Yeah.
I need to. I was at the Fleet Feet store the other day, oddly enough, because I needed to get my shoes changed because I was running on with a different pair of Brooks, but then I started feeling like my foot like I was running barefoot a little bit then
Oh,
afterwards. So
yeah.
they went and changed the model of Brooks for me, and so I got that taken care of, and then I had to get like Lady Stick because I finished that one, and that's important
Yeah.
because
Can't go wrong.
believe me, because once you forget it, some days when you forget to put Lady Stick for anti-chafe on, you regret it.
Yep, you know it. It's always when you get in a hot shower after where you're like, "Oh, yep, there's the spot I missed. That is exactly on me."
And even during the run, though, it's even
Yeah.
during the run when you forget to put your anti-chafe on, it's like you're like trying to smile while you're crying inside. You're like,
You're like, "I did this to me."
no. Yes, I had to get that, and I got the shoes, and I got some sunglasses because I could not find the other Gooder sunglasses. I usually run with a visor,
Uh-huh.
but there's some days when it's so hot that even wearing a visor can be like torture.
Too much, yeah.
Yeah, it could be too much. Um, so I got that for the days when it's just super hot, and I'm like, I don't want to deal with a visor today. But that I do like to do orange chews for the gel. I love the applesauce. Also, one thing I've started liking to eat, and I know this is weird, but I've done this before on races too. At F3 half in winter, perfect example.
Yeah.
I took those uncrustable peanut butter and jellies,
Yeah.
and I remember I was like having a snack because I started getting hungry towards the end. And I remember one of the runners was passing by. She's like, "Snack time, huh?" And some people are like, "That's so smart. I wish I would have done something like that because I just
Yeah.
needed that energy." So that also I like doing as well. But I I don't know if that's the best. I don't know if coaches will agree that's the best thing to take with you on a marathon run is a peanut butter and jelly, but it's worked for me on long
If it works, it
distances.
works.
It
Yeah.
works.
Everybody, I think our bodies are all a little bit different. We all process foods and gels and things like that a little bit different. So I always just kind of give the disclaimer, try anything and everything. And if you find something that works for you, like stick with it, you know? Well, I'm curious just to shift gears a little bit. Since we can't break down, I would love to sit here and break down all 13, but I want to kind of talk about maybe your most memorable marathon, whether it was memorable for, something amazing or memorable because it was something that you went through. But where out of all those marathons, like which one stands out the most to you, would you say?
The 2019 New York City Marathon, that one I would say stood out the most because first and foremost, nobody told me that they had cannons at the start to start people. They do the cannon blast and then they do the New York song from Frank Sinatra.
Yeah.
And I remember we were just at the Charity Village, and here's the thing: where our tent was, it was not super far off from the start, but I remember hearing this big boom, and I was like, wait, what is that? And they're like, oh, yeah, marathon started, the wheelchair division's off. And then they started making announcements, that the athletes are going to start their race. Please don't be startled by the sound of the start cannon. That stuff, it was loud. I was not prepared for it. So I remember I'd be covering my ears like, oh gosh, every half hour, whatever, 15 minutes. I forgot how often, but it was loud. So
So they do it every single flight that takes off. They do it again.
oh yeah, it's every
Oh,
single
that's
wave
brutal.
that takes off. So it
Yeah.
was brutal. And I remember having to wake up because I woke up and I remember my parents saw me off. I forgot my headphones in my hotel
Oh
room. So I was like,
no.
oh my God. Okay. I was like, forget it. I don't need it anyway. And then I actually stuck with the pace group when I first got when we first started. So depending on what color your bib is for your wave, either you're going over the Verrazano Bridge or under. but at the end, but everybody meets at like mile 4. So the first one I actually was running under,
Mm.
but I remember like even when people were starting, some people were singing and everybody, all the runners started to sing along, kind of do a sing along thing at the beginning. And we saw like the trucks drive by with people's gear and they were like cheering us on. And then I just, everything about that experience, like so much cheering. I think like mile 8 was like the YMCA and they had like music blasting. I mean, honestly, just the amount of love that you get that day on that course, it just brings me to tears. It's like you have people who just they're cheering you every single way. Like you don't ever feel alone during that race at all.
Yeah.
You don't ever feel alone. You don't ever feel like you're abandoned at any point because there are people cheering you on left, right, and center. Like even when you're on the Queensboro Bridge, as you're getting towards the end, you still hear you still hear the spectators cheering you on, and you get on the First Ave, and you have like, and I had like a friend who came, he came out and he saw me on First Avenue, and I remember there was another girl who was standing by them. I did not know her, but then she was calling my name, and I was like, oh my God, this is like, I mean, it's just so surreal.
Yeah.
And then when you're in Central Park, I remember like when one of the runners is like, come on, you're almost there, let's pick our feet up, let's push now. And like people, just everyone's so supportive. And people are, that's one of the things I remember most about that marathon is just the just the love, that just that city, the city. There's just so much of a different vibe and just a different like life that comes out. And yeah, it's hard to explain all of it. You have to
Yeah.
experience it to kind of get what I'm saying, all of it. But it's one that will bring me, I know it brings myself to tears
Yeah.
always.
Yeah, anybody that talks about it just talks about it with so much passion. Like it's something that I feel like everybody either needs to spectate or experience to really know what it is. Me included. I need to get to New York at some point and make it happen. But yeah, everybody that talks about it like has a very similar reaction to just how you did. Like the energy is incredible. The people are supportive and it just moves you along. It's very cool to hear people like yourself talk about New York like that.
It is. It's such an emotional experience. But you know what, though? I also feel Chicago people come alive too here. The
Yeah.
crowds in Chicago are also just amazing. Like you know, I remember there was a time when I was getting emotional during a run, and a spectator asked, "Are you okay?" And it was just like, even that too. I mean, it just every time, it's every marathon I've ever run. So 2019, that was the first time I did New York City. Then I did it in 2021 and 22. But each time, and I'll tell you this, each time I ran in New York and each time I've ran in Chicago, I always get a little emotional.
Yeah. Do you feel like it's like a unique experience each time? Every single time is a little bit different, or is it pretty much the same like energy every time?
You know what? It's different each time. I feel like
Yeah.
each time, because you know what, with each year, you set different things for yourself then. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
it's kind of like, for example, if you were to, let's say, start baking, right? And each time you bake something, you want something to be different. You want to be, maybe you're going to set different kind of goals for yourself on what you bake,
Right.
right? So even if it's the first time, fine, you want to make a simple chocolate cake, great, right? Maybe the second time you want to maybe add something to it, right? Maybe like a nice rich chocolate ganache. Third time, right? You want to maybe add some other kinds of things into that, right? To just make it more flavorful and unique. And it's just like you want to keep building, like different times when you start baking, maybe you may want to experiment more with different flavors, different kind of combinations, different maybe like types of ganaches you may want to use or whatever else, right? So
Yeah.
it just each time is so different. And I feel like for me, uh I it's different in the sense of I put certain goals on myself. Maybe I want to adjust, like, what time do I finish, this race? How can I push to get to finish faster than I want, or do I want to finish in a certain time, like time goals. And that's one thing my coach does amazingly with me is before the race, she'll send an email and we talk about ranges and time goals and things. And there's a plan A, plan B, and plan C.
It's always smart. Yeah.
Yes, and I think it's a great idea. And this is one thing I was always told, even before I started working with this run coach, when I was with that running group, one of the coaches always said, you should always have 3 goals on the fly. So the first one, what's your ideal goal? So let's say you want to finish a marathon in 4 hours. Great. Okay. That's your number 1 goal. The number 2 goal. Okay. Let's say you missed the mark on 4. What's the next goal that you have? Right. So maybe, 4 hours and 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Fine. Maybe let's say, right, something happens that's just not your day. 4 hours and 15 minutes is out of your reach. Then what's the next goal, right? Let's just finish it off, right? And you may not made your 4 hour or 4 hour and 15. Maybe you finish a lot later than you would like, but the fact is just to finish.
Yeah. Yeah, you still hit a goal. I think that's what's cool about ABC goals is you didn't hit A, okay, you didn't hit B, okay, but you still reached a goal. So you should, have a little bit of pride in that when you have goals set out for yourself like that.
I agree. And just also, the thing is, whether you're running a half marathon, full marathon, ultra, 5K, 10K, you're still doing a distance.
Yeah.
Right? This is still, something that, as much as you look at it, you may look at it and be like, oh, well, I finished this distance in this time and I'm not happy about it. Well, there's another person who's thinking, how do I even get to a start line? Right? Like, it's all relative, as much. And this is one thing a coach had told me years ago, and I take his word to this day. This is part of the mantra as well, is, trying not to beat yourself up or compare yourself to other runners, because everybody has a story. And this is one thing he told me. He said, Sonia, you don't know their story. You don't know what they're running from. You don't know what their life is. You don't also know their journey to it. But, Sonia, at the same token, I should tell you, people could look at you and be like, I wish I was doing the mileage you are today. I wish I had the endurance and stamina to do what you're doing today, right? And so it's all relative, right? And I think that's a thing that, no matter what, taking pride in the fact you're even doing it at all.
Absolutely. No, I love that perspective, and I think that's where focusing on the process a lot comes into play too. Maybe you would agree. But yeah, like if you put so much emphasis on the end goal, then you don't get a chance to like process those kind of things. Like process that things are relative. The process of running a marathon's a couple of months usually that you're dedicating your life to. So that when you can kind of live in that and sit in that, I think you have more time to think about those things, like you mentioned. But I think that's a great way to look at it.
Well, thank you. Yes. And I believe that, and I agree, it is about the journey. Like they say,
Yeah.
one of the slogans for one of the run groups here in Chicago is it's all about the journey. And it's true. The hardest part of a marathon is the training, hands down. And the, the way I look at it is this, the marathon itself, it's just basically a celebration day from start to finish, because you're celebrating all the hard work you put in over the summer. Because think about it. Think about how much courage it takes to just get up and get out of the house and be in the heat, and allow yourself to be one with the heat and keep pushing forward, even though at times it feels oppressive.
Yeah.
I mean, and this is one thing, it's, and the more that you do that, right, and each time that you get out there is each time you're setting yourself up for success too. Each time you lace up and get out the door. that's you're getting one step closer to the success that you're looking for. And I feel like the marathon is just a way to just showcase, and celebrate yourself and be proud of yourself for all the hard work you've put in. It's a chance for you to also see, how, test your limits. Can you exceed your expectations? And if not, it's not, you still accomplish something great regardless, right? It's also a test for you to, you know, just see how great you could be.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that a lot. And I guess in that same vein, I want to ask about, you've given a lot of great little nuggets of advice throughout this whole thing, but if you could, like, out of all of your marathon experiences, boil it down to one piece of advice that you would give maybe a newer runner or someone thinking about running their first marathon, like what advice would that be for you?
Don't get so caught up on pace all the time, or and don't be intimidated by the distance, because after all, it's not it's not scary. It really is not. It may sound scary. So 26.2 miles. You know, at the start of that sounds very intimidating, okay? But truth is, when you start getting into a routine and you get one with yourself, right? As you're out there, whether it's like maybe you're going to listen to a podcast to start with to start you off. Maybe you are going to listen to some nice tunes, upbeat tunes. Maybe you are just going to just enjoy the sound of your own footsteps, and maybe you're by water, you can hear the lake or the ocean or wherever you're at, or maybe you're going to listen to the breezes of the trees, something. But the more that you get into it with yourself, just getting into that routine, miles will tick off. And you'll be surprised, sometimes you're going to look down on your watch and be like, wait a minute, I'm already at 10 miles already. How did that happen? Right. And that can happen because you get so into it. Right. And it, and also don't think that, even with pacing too, remember that not every run is a fast as like run as fast as you can kind of run. It's not
Yeah.
like that. Most of the runs that you're going to do for your marathon training and long distance training are on the slower side. There's a reason for that, is because it's meant to build your endurance. On race day, you're going to naturally you're going to run faster anyway, because on race day, you're first and foremost, you're going to be carbo loaded, right? You're going to have your hydration pat down. Also the adrenaline of a race and having the crowd energy, that's going to keep pushing you too, you know? So, so naturally on a race day, you're going to go a little faster in general.
Yeah.
But even like but with marathon training, right? You have certain runs for certain reasons, right? The majority of it is going to be on like a slower end. And sometimes it's even going to be slower than your own race pace, just because you want to have that chance to build your endurance, build that mitochondria, all that other stuff that you have, that will help you and push you to those distances. You're going to be doing this is it, if you want to run further, faster, right? Like will be doing speed work, right? There's different reasons why you will do different runs, but it's about enjoy. But like at the same time, don't get so caught up that it's all about pacing, because it's really not. That's one thing I
Yeah.
want to say.
Absolutely. Yeah, time and a place for it. Like you said, there's speed workouts where you'll get to push yourself for sure, but there's also going to be workouts where it's going to be to your benefit to slow down. So, yeah, I think that's all great advice. Appreciate you sharing that.
Well,
Um,
thank you.
well, cool. And then I know you have, for you, marathon 14 and 15 coming up. We're already in August, so how the heck are you fitting in 2 more marathons this year?
Well, I'm excited because it's Chicago and New York,
Oh, cool.
and
Okay, sweet.
it's yeah, and these are both cities that I love to run in. And it's,
Yeah.
when you run in Chicago, you're running in your home city, right? So,
Yeah.
well, at least for me, I'm running in my home city. I'm like, it's always nice to have that kind of, just, oh, I'm running around my neighborhoods and it's going to be fun, just that fun energy. That's the thing I look forward to the most. And actually, it's one of my most favorite times of year is marathon season. That's like
Yeah.
the best time of year for me in the fall because I just love to be, just the energy is so unmatched. Like even in Chicago, something about marathon weekend just it it's just so the energy I can't even explain how just how contagious it is in a good way, how just I don't know, it's just out there, it's like popping, people are buzzing. I mean, it's just so it's all love, it's all support. You get all these people in from all over the world, and you get people with their families and their friends, and
Yeah.
it's just like something it's hard to put into words, but it's just there. It's just it's like it's so nice to know like you are taking part in a thing where it's like everybody's together. It's like the
Yeah.
community, the world, like the city comes together for it. It's so nice.
Yeah. That's very cool. And to have it in your home state too is very, very cool. Um,
Absolutely.
so Chicago, what month is Chicago? I know
October.
November. So October you have one and then November you have another one.
Yeah, so October 13th is Chicago and then November 3rd is New York City.
Very exciting. Well, I'm
Hmm.
excited to follow along with your training and see everything kind of come to fruition at the end of the year. I'm guessing this isn't the first year that you've ran both in the same year, so you're probably used to
No.
this routine.
Yeah, I did it in 2019, 2021, and 2022.
Very cool.
And it was, I mean, and there was a year, it was 2021. I actually ran faster in New York City than I did in Chicago that year
Wow.
by 20 minutes.
Wow. Wow. That's a much hillier course, no? I would think, with the
Yes,
bridges
yes,
and everything.
yes, it was a much hillier course, but there's always something about, like running in those cities. It's just like people are together. And I also run for Autism Speaks Team Up, and
Yeah.
it just, knowing that, and this is the thing with me, and especially this year now, going into marathons 14 and 15,
Yeah.
I I'm totally dedicating it to people outside of myself. Like it's not even I never looked at it as this is about me, but what really gets me going more so above and beyond the energy of the crowd and everything, I kind of just mentioned about with people getting together all over the world, families and friends, and it's just, contagious energy. But above and beyond that is I'm thinking about people who are on the autism spectrum. I am thinking about like parents who have kids who are on the autism spectrum. And these are, amazing mothers and fathers and siblings of those who are on the spectrum and spouses of those on the spectrum. And I'm thinking even like people who have friends who are on the spectrum. It's just outside of myself, teachers, therapists who work with it. I'm thinking, like speech pathologists, occupational therapists,
Yeah.
athletes, trying to make it more inclusive. Um, they're just so, and that's what really tugs at my heartstrings is knowing when I'm wearing that jersey and it says team up, when I'm wearing the visor, it says team up, knowing I'm, this is all for them. It's not about me. My whole life, I've always lived a life where I've always said to myself, you know, I may have gone through a lot of my own challenges being on the autism spectrum, but you know what? I want to give back. I've always made it a mission. You know what? I'm going to give back. And through the book, Dropped in the Maze, which is getting second round of edits at the moment with the publisher, and my podcast on the spectrum with Sonia, I you know, I'm I'm showcasing this opportunity to give back, to allow people, chances to share their stories, to give back to others in ways. Um, because I feel like at the end of the day, that's what it really is about, above and beyond the mileage, above and beyond the medal, above and beyond
Absolutely.
community. It's about giving back to them. And I I made it a mission to dedicate my running and things I do in my life for others.
That's great. I love that.
Mm.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And I think it's even more just beautiful the way that you put it like that, because a lot of people will run for charity for these races for the sake of getting, like, a little bit more of a selfish reason, for the sake of getting into the New York City Marathon and running it, or for the sake of getting into Chicago. But I think people like yourself is the reason why these charities are still around and they're still a thing, is because you're able to, like, separate yourself, the runner, from the cause, and embody, what it is to be a charity runner. So I think that's fantastic, and I think that you're doing amazing work.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And I think you're also doing an amazing job. I love listening to your podcast. I love hearing other people's stories on here. And one thing I will say is everybody so between now and October, people who've either been on my podcast or I've been on theirs, I'm running a mile in their honor at the
Oh,
marathon.
amazing. That's
So
awesome.
I'll be running a mile in your honor, Taylor. I'll
Oh
be
my
running a mile
gosh.
in your honor. Yes, I'm doing that for them. I'm dedicating miles because this is the thing. This is what I love to do too during
Yeah,
marathons is dedicate miles to people.
that's amazing.
So
So each
before,
mile you're
yeah.
thinking about them, really.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And I usually dedicate the last mile to my parents.
Yeah.
But this year, I'm going to have so many people I'm going to be running and thinking about. And so, one thing I might have to start doing, I've heard of this, like people will write on their arm.
Yeah, you're gonna
So,
have a list.
yes, I think I'm going to have to do that or
Yeah.
find a way to find somebody who knows how to make a sticker tattoo or something out of it.
Right, right. Just so you can
But
remember.
because I know people who do this, they'll write stuff on their arm about where people are going to be, and they'll have a whole list written down on their arm. And
Dang.
I'm like, that's brilliant. I
That
need to
is.
do
That's
that.
great.
Or one thing,
Um,
I'll just do that with my phone. Better yet,
there
maybe
you
I'll just
go.
do it
Yeah,
easier.
just make your list. There you go. Well, cool. Well, you were so
Well,
lovely to speak to. Thank you so much
thank
for
you.
coming on the podcast and telling a little bit of your story, and more than that, just offering some advice. I think that a lot of people will gain a lot from listening to this episode. So thank you so much, and I'm really looking forward to seeing everything that comes up for you at the end of this year.
Thank you. Thank you so, so much. And thank you for having me on here.
Thank you so much for tuning into another episode. If you're enjoying My First Marathon, it would mean the world to me if you could rate and review the show. And if you or someone you know has ran a marathon and would like to share your story, I have a guest form to fill out in my bio on Instagram. That username is @MyFirstMarathonPod. See you on the next one.